with that, let's shift to talking about A&M because very different situation for the Aggies. Obviously, they are in restart mode after the Jimbo Fisher era crashed and burned, simply put. They start over with Mike Elko, pay $75 million to Jimbo Fisher to not coach, and we're back at square one. And Mike Elko's done a lot of good things, but he has a tall task ahead of him to get A&M ready to go with. I think A&M has definitely had more difficult SEC schedules in their, 11 years now in the league. But this is a tricky one. What I will say as we look at the schedule and the win total, so A&M's win total per FanDuel is sitting at 8.5 right now. And I know the jokes of Texas 8-4 write themselves. I get it. But over 8.5 plus 114, under 8.5 minus 142. So again, obviously the sports book is leading you towards betting the under with those odds, saying that's more favorable, more likely. All of what should be A&M's most difficult games are at home this year. This schedule is going to flip next year, and it's going to be absolutely brutal for the Aggies. But this year, in 2024, their four hardest games, their four most talented opponents, Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, and Texas, all at Kyle Field. That means something. That's going to be very interesting to see. If A&M can go 2-2 in those games, and Mike Elko is truly a better coach than Jimbo Fisher, he's going to win road game. When's the last time A&M won a road game? 2021. Okay? It has been almost 3 years.
That's bizarre.
It was October 2021. The last time Texas A&M won a true road game. That's almost 3 calendar years. Okay? So
that doesn't feel real.
It doesn't. It's really sad. And the road games this year, their first one is extremely difficult at Florida. I think that's going to be a fascinating game. The winner of that game, I know Florida has a huge matchup week 1 against Miami. We've talked a lot about that game. But this week 3 game, the first conference game for both teams, might be more pivotal even than that one for both of the trajectories of this season. But after that Miami game, or Florida game, they play at Mississippi State after a bye week. Mississippi State is going to be lower level in the conference. They play at South Carolina. I'm not super high on the Gamecocks this year. And they play at Auburn. That's it as far as road conference games go. So the schedule sets up very favorably to beat that 8.5 number. That's not what we're asking, though. What is successful for Texas A&M in 2024?
I'm going to say it, and I don't want Aggie fans to be mad at me. And we had a bunch of y'all show up for one of our episodes recently. And if you check up here, or up there, I got my shelf with some A&M stuff on it. Understand, Aggie fans, I'm not trying to trash on us or nothing like that. But I think a successful season at A&M is 8-4.
No.
I'm not trying to be weird.
No.
I'm not trying to be. No, look at it, though. Look at the schedule. Okay, look at the schedule. Okay, if you lose to Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, Texas, I think most Aggies would understand that in year 1 that makes sense. Here's another couple of things. Connor Wigman is extremely talented at the quarterback spot. He still hasn't played that much football. And I think he's got all the talent in the world to be one of the top quarterbacks. I think all this, there's a lot of weird media headlines of, A&M's Connor Wigman going to be the top quarterback or a Heisman. I'm like, let's slow down on that. He's plenty talented. He could get there. It wouldn't shock me if he got to that level, but I don't think you can count on that from a guy who hasn't still played that much football. I understand there's an injury that's part of that. He hadn't played that much football. He played a little bit his freshman year because he needed to because of injuries ahead of him. And then he got injured, like the 3rd or 4th game last season. And that was it. And so you have to consider that. Also, new offensive system. That can be really tough on a new quarterback. So we'll have to look at all of that. I think there's a lot of good pieces. The one thing I'm really concerned about is there is almost zero depth at wide receiver and linebacker. And there's some good players there. I think that Muhsin Muhammad is an extremely talented wide receiver. I think Ja'Day Walker did a lot of good things last year. And on the other side, in the linebacker core, Taurean York, we talked about him. He's going to be one of the best linebackers in the country this year. But who else is stepping up? I mean, Noah Thomas is really talented at the wide receiver spot. He could be really good. After that, it's Cyrus Allen, like Micah Tees, right? Like there's options.
Talented guys, highly rated guys, but have not
Highly rated
proven
guys
on the field yet.
hadn't proved anything, right? And so, in the same way that I would look at Texas, that we just talked about, and say, hey, they got a lot of guys that I got question marks about because, you know, Isaiah Bond's coming from Bama, but what's he going to look like at Texas and who else is there? I'm going to ask the same questions about A&M. You got some good top of the line stuff, but there's not a lot of depth. And so, if you're week 3 at Florida and Masin Muhammad goes down with an injury, what are you doing at the wide receiver spot? Like, who are you throwing passes to? You got to throw passes to somebody. Connor Wingman can be good, and if his guys can't get separation, they can't get separation. And so, again, let me frame this whole thing. Aggie fans, 8-4 is good if it looks consistent. If you're scoring points and you're not blowing up and 1 week you're running the football well, and the next week you're not, and you don't show up and score 14 out the gates in a quarter, and then you don't score again until the fourth quarter, or the defense shows up and you can pretty consistently stop teams, and every now and then they get you, but you kind of get. If 8-4 looks consistent, I think a lot of Aggie fans are going to go, okay, that's fine. It's not happy, but I think that's fine. Now, if you're talking like success levels, 9-3, 10-2, I think is realistic for what A&M can expect. I don't think that A&M has the ability to do anything close to undefeated or realistically make the playoff, right? Anything can happen. Go win against Notre Dame week 1 and we can talk. But Missouri is a really good football team, and they're going to be bringing a very talented quarterback and a very experienced quarterback and some daggone playmakers to Kyle Field. LSU is still very talented. I'm not necessarily as high on them as a lot of people are, but LSU is still very talented, and Garrett Nussmeier should not be blinked at, and they still got dogs on both sides of the football. And yeah, the Texas Longhorns are a dang good team, and even though they may not quite be as good as they were last year, even though they got some new pieces, you're still getting them at the end of the season when they'll have all of that figured out. You'll have all of your stuff figured out too, but Texas will have everything figured out, and all these new pieces and new faces that need to get implemented will be. And so I'm not saying they're for sure going to lose all those games, but if you split those games and go 2-2, I think you're ecstatic if you're an Aggie fan, if you can take care of business along the way. Now, what's not successful is if in the same season you beat Texas, but then you lose to Arkansas and Mississippi State, and that's how you get to 9-3 or something like that. That's not successful because that's inconsistency. Jimbo Fisher could have done that. Jimbo Fisher did that. He beat Bama, right? He beat Bama a couple years ago, and that wasn't a successful season because he lost so many other games and there were injuries and everything else. And so, again, I think consistency is what you're looking for if you're A&M, and if your ceiling is your ceiling, it is what it is. If you're just not talented enough this year, that's fine. Go build up your roster, go kill it in the portal, and show up next year.
8-4 is not successful for Texas A&M. I'm just gonna say that because that means you either. I'm gonna use your argument against you here a little bit because that means you either went 0-4 in those 4 home games. That's unacceptable to me. First of all, I think it's I know it's year 1.
Sure.
If you go 0-4 against the only teams worth a damn you're playing at home, that's unacceptable. You have to get at least 1 and probably 2 of those for me to say you did good with your home schedule. That maybe that's asking too much of Mike Elko, but I don't think that you said Jimbo Fisher could do that. Jimbo Fisher could go 0-4 at home.
And he did.
And if you don't go 0-4 at home, that means, like you said, you're losing to some mediocre teams on the road. Maybe you drop to Florida in a desperation situation, your first road trip under Elko.
Sure.
But then you're either losing to South Carolina, Arkansas in a neutral venue, Mississippi State, or the other one's losing
at Auburn.
At Auburn. Auburn, you shouldn't lose at Auburn. Your pass rush should make Peyton Thorne have a nightmare day.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is consistency. There's a lot of shoulds on there. I think that there's 4 teams that can make a good case to beating A&M this year. And I don't know. Yes, they're all at home. And maybe it looks different. Maybe by midway through the season, right, when you get to LSU at the end of October, maybe at that point you're saying, hey, Connor Wigman and co, you got to have it figured out, right? Like Colin Klein's offense has got to be figured out at that point. You know, maybe you're more forgiving with an early loss against Notre Dame, even maybe an early loss at Florida if it means that you clean up against, Mizzou and LSU and then Auburn, maybe play Texas close, right? Maybe that's how you get to 9-3 is, Notre
It's
Dame, Florida, Texas. That would be a good season in my mind, right? If you're
9-3
playing
is fine. 9-3, I think
Sure.
you cannot argue that'd be successful. Go win a 10th game in the bowl game. You're winning 10 games for the first time since I think 2012, right? Obviously the COVID season is an asterisk, but
right.
You got to win 9 for me. Like for it to be successful, I know it's year one. I know it's laying the groundwork for the future. Talent on the field is not the problem for Texas A&M. They lost some guys in the portal. They replaced a lot of them in the portal with more experienced guys and guys that are better cultural fits for what Mike Elko's
well, and frankly, I'd rather take some of those guys over the guys I lost. Like if you're asking me, would you rather have the Big Ten sack leader or Walter Nolan, who hasn't tried all that hard? I'll take the Big Ten sack leader. I'm fine with that on my defensive line. I know it's a different style of player, but I'll take that on my defensive line and give somebody else a shot that wants to. And so what I don't want to do, though, is I don't want to be, hyperbolic or unrealistic with any of this, right? Like I don't think A&M fans will be happy if it's 8-4. I just think there'd be a lot of understanding. Like, yeah, you know what? Okay.
Yeah, not for me. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's time. The talent is there, and if Elko is truly a better coach, they need to win 9 games.
Sure.
I know it's year one. If he is truly a better coach, if this staff as a whole, I'm not talking about just Elko, but I'm talking about Colin Klein as an upgraded offensive coordinator and Elko running the defense. I know he has a defensive coordinator, but Elko is going to run the defense. If that combo is truly better, and it wasn't a waste of $75 million to fire Jimbo Fisher early, you need to win 9 games this year.
Sure. Well, then let me ask you a question on that then. Of those 4 games, Notre Dame, Mizzou, LSU, Texas, how would you rank those in terms of A&M should win this game?
Just on the field, I think they match up best with Missouri and LSU. They played LSU close last year in Baton Rouge. It got away from them late, and they replaced the secondary talent that let it get away from them late.
That's very true.
I'm not high on LSU or Missouri's defense, and that scares me for a team. I know the offense can be great at both of those places, but playing at Kyle Field, you have to pack your defense.
Right.
The way that A&M has been beaten at Kyle Field is less from being blitzed offensively, but more from defensive prowess and shutting down A&M's offense. Yeah. I don't know that either Mizzou I don't think people are talking enough about how much Mizzou lost on defense this past year. And I think they match up best with Mizzou. I think the second best matchup is LSU. After that, it's kind of a toss-up between Texas and Notre Dame for me. I have Ari Wasserman at The Athletic predicted Notre Dame to go 12-0 today on his podcast. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't know, man. That's optimistic.
If you were asking me, if you flipped those games, I would actually be more likely to pick A&M in both of those. If you're going into a rowdy Kyle Field week 1 and Texas is still trying to figure out who their wide receiver weapons are, what their defensive line rotation is, all that stuff, and A&M, you don't have a lot of film on them running this offense. I actually like A&M's chances more if Texas was week 1 versus the end of the year. And I would like their chances against Notre Dame more if it was at the end of the year versus the beginning of the year, because I think Notre Dame is going to be a more polished product week 1. So that's a very long-winded way of saying the path to 2-2 in those games is beating Mizzou and LSU. I think they can do it. If they do, that gives you room for one slip up on the road. I want to see them do it on the road. Successful to me is showing that you can win on the road. And you're probably going to lose at least one game on the road, but you need to clean up the rest of them. You need to play a complete game on the road and win some dang road games.
Would you right now pick A&M to beat either Mizzou or LSU? Just like right now, as you're sitting here, you say, oh yeah, they'll win that game.
Let me tell you, because I can tell you my model that I'm teasing for preview season. I can tell you exactly what the spreads are in that model.
Well, because I can, my big idea here is just, I think if you're looking just at what games they should win, what games they shouldn't win, I don't know that individually I pick them to win any of those games. You're right that they should win one of those four, right? They should go at least 1-3 in those games to make it, acceptable to fans. You shouldn't lose all your important games at home. But I'm having a hard time. I guess it's maybe my thing. I'm having a hard time figuring out which of those games I would say, oh, just right now, if you made me pick in a vacuum, A&M versus Missouri, I think I'm going Missouri, right? I think I like the offense a little bit. If in a vacuum you make me say A&M versus LSU, yeah, I think by that point in the season, maybe LSU. And so, like, again, anything could happen, right? It could turn out that Colin Klein is, the next coming of, insert, Lane Kiffin or, one of those, and he's an amazing offensive coordinator, and he's going to turn into, this absolute juggernaut, and A&M's offense is going to go screaming up the field. But I just, I'm kind of in a wait and see, right? He did good at Kansas State. Does that translate to the SEC? I don't know. So I don't know if I'd pick them in any of those games individually.
So we're way over time on A&M. I apologize if you're not interested in A&M. This is a very passionate fan discussion, and we don't want to lose that soul on this podcast. So I'll just tell you real quick before we move on to north of the Red River. Notre Dame, this is combining the SP Plus and home field advantage. Notre Dame is a 1.5-point favorite against A&M. Mizzou's about a 1-point favorite. Okay. LSU is about a 3-point favorite, and Texas is about a 7.2 point favorite.
Right.
7.5-point favorite.
So that's kind of where I'm saying, like, I think in each of those games I might lean the other way. And so I'm saying if you lose those games, but let's say you lose them all real close, and they showed a lot of fight, and the offense looked good and scored a bunch of points, and you're losing these games, like, and all the totals are in the 30s, right? You're just not quite getting – I don't know. Like, I feel like that's something that can be stomached if it looks consistent.
It would leave me with a really bad taste in my mouth. I'm not going to lie to you. Like 8-4, we've seen that before. I want to see something better than that to be considered successful. I need 9 wins, and we disagree on that. That's okay. Yeah. We'll see what happens on the field.
Before we leave, just to make sure, I'm a bona fides right here. Okay, guys, that's my ring. I'm not hating on A&M. I'm not an A&M hater, right? All my Aggie fans out there, I'm not hating on it. I want them to go win every game this season, and I'll be there for a bunch of them. But I can't sit here and realistically say, like, oh yeah, success is 9 wins when I mean last couple seasons have been kind of awful. Right, last couple you go win 8 wins, get in a somewhat okay bowl game against a decent opponent and win it. We hadn't won a bowl game since the Orange Bowl in the COVID season. So yeah. I'd be okay with that.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see how they do. And yeah, I don't know. Like, there's so many unknowns with this Texas A&M team. And I still have the opinion. Like, I know I teased it earlier. I think that game at the end of November could be for a college football playoff spot.
I hope you're right, man. That would make that game so electric. Could you imagine that game with like a couple of 9-2s or something like that? That'd be a lot of fun.
Electric. The guy that put his tickets up for like $220,000 each.
He'd get his money's worth. Yep.
If it's that. Well, hey,
great. Ted Cruz showing up just to ruin it.
Well, he showed up for the George Strait concert, so
there you go.
0-12 income.
Gracious him! How about